The woman who lived between the lines, Rachel Bennett, understood the art of disappearing in plain sight. At 32, she had perfected the careful balance of being essential without being noticed. Every morning at 6, she arrived at Whitmore Technologies headquarters in downtown Seattle, always before the executive floor came alive with voices and ambition. Her desk faced floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Puget Sound. But Rachel rarely watched the ferries crossing the gray-blue water. She was too busy making sure other people's days ran smoothly. Her mother had taught her about quiet. Strength before cancer took her voice entirely. In those final months, when words became precious, her mother had pressed a small silver locket into Rachel's palm. Inside was a tiny photograph and an inscription. "Brave hearts beat softly." Rachel wore it every day, hidden beneath her blouses. A reminder that power didn't always announce itself. The morning. Everything changed. The coffee machine in the executive kitchen hissed and gurgled as Rachel prepared. Jonathan Whitmore's preferred blend. She knew he took it black, no sugar, in the blue ceramic mug his late wife had given him years ago. Rachel had never met Catherine Whitmore, but she felt her presence in small ways. The framed photograph on Jonathan's desk. The way he sometimes paused before answering, as if consulting a memory. The classical music that played softly in his office on difficult days. Rachel was arranging quarterly reports. When Jonathan emerged from his office, unlike the other executives who wore their authority like expensive cologne, Jonathan moved with understated purpose. His suits were well-tailored but not flashy. His graying hair was neatly trimmed. At 45, he carried the weight of building a tech empire with quiet determination rather than loud celebration. "Rachel," he said, and she looked up from her color-coded filing system. "Do you have a moment?" She nodded, tucking a strand of dark hair behind her ear. Jonathan rarely sought her out directly. Communication usually flowed through emails, brief notes, or the shared calendar that governed both their lives. "The Innovation Gala is Saturday," he began, referencing the annual charity event that Whitmore Technologies sponsored. "The board feels it would be beneficial if I appeared more approachable this year, less isolated." He paused, and Rachel saw something flicker across his face. Discomfort, perhaps, or reluctance. "Would you consider attending? Just for one dance? To help ease the optics?" The request hung in the air like morning mist over the sound. Rachel's heart performed a strange skip, but her face remained composed. She thought of the locket against her skin. Brave hearts beat softly. Of course, she said simply, "What time should I arrive?" Relief softened Jonathan's expression. 7. "Thank you, Rachel. I know this isn't part of your usual responsibilities." After he returned to his office, Rachel sat very still. The Seattle skyline stretched before her, all glass and ambition reaching toward low clouds. She had just agreed to step into a spotlight she'd spent years avoiding. The question wasn't whether she could do it. The question was what it would cost. When laughter cuts deeper than silence, Grace Park's living room in Capitol Hill smelled like the lavender candles she bought from the farmer's market. It was Thursday evening, and their weekly book club had gathered. Rachel sat on the overstuffed couch, her hands wrapped around a mug of chamomile tea. As the conversation drifted from the novel they'd barely read to the upcoming gala, "Jonathan Whitmore asked you to be his date." Grace's voice climbed with surprise. As a nurse at Swedish Medical Center, Grace had seen enough of life's drama to rarely be shocked. But this clearly qualified. "Not a date," Rachel corrected quickly. "Just one dance." For appearances, laughter started small. Amanda, a marketing consultant with perfect hair and sharper opinions, was first. "Oh, honey, that's exactly what everyone will think it is. The lonely billionaire and his devoted assistant." She said it like reciting a tired romance novel plot. "Do you even own a dress?" Jennifer added, not unkindly, but the question still stung. As a corporate lawyer, Jennifer lived in power suits, in courtroom confidence. "You're going to need something that doesn't scream. I coordinate your calendar." The room filled with advice that felt more like warning. Stories of assistants who misread signals. Tales of professional relationships that curdled into scandal. Rachel listened to her friends turn her simple yes into a cautionary tale. They laughed because they cared, she told herself. They laughed because they were afraid for her. But their laughter followed her home to her small Fremont apartment. Echoing in the quiet spaces, the photograph that started the Whisper campaign Friday afternoon brought rain. As it often did in Seattle, Rachel was reviewing the gala seating arrangements when her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She almost deleted it without looking, but something made her open the message. The photograph was grainy but unmistakable. Taken from a distance, it showed Rachel and Jonathan walking through the company's rooftop garden. They'd been discussing the quarterly environmental initiatives. Walking among the sustainable planters and rain collection systems, in the image their heads were tilted toward each other in conversation. Innocent in reality. Intimate in implication. The caption below made Rachel's stomach tighten. Executive perks now include personal attention. Whitmore tech's rising controversy. Her hands trembled slightly as she traced the locket at her throat. Someone was watching. Someone wanted to create a narrative. Rachel's mind moved through possibilities with the same systematic approach she used for logistics. Diane Foster, the VP who'd been positioning herself for more board influence. The tech blogger who'd been trying to dig up scandal for months, or perhaps someone else entirely hidden in the corporate machinery. Rachel didn't panic. Panic was a luxury she couldn't afford. Instead, she opened her laptop and began documenting. Timestamps of meetings. Witnesses to conversations. A careful record of professional boundaries maintained. If someone wanted to build a story around her, she would construct the framework of truth first. Choosing dignity over doubts Saturday morning, arrived with rare sunshine breaking through Seattle's gray. Rachel stood in her bedroom, looking at the dress hanging on her closet door. Not sequins or drama. She'd chosen deep emerald green, elegant and understated. A dress that said she belonged without demanding to be the center of attention, Grace had called earlier. Worry threading through her voice. You don't have to go. You could say you're sick. No one would blame you. But Rachel would blame herself. Running meant the Whispers won. Running meant accepting that her presence beside Jonathan was something shameful rather than professional. She thought of her mother, who had faced her final months with grace that made doctors weep, who had smiled through pain because she refused to let cancer steal her humanity. Brave hearts beat softly, but they still beat. Rachel applied minimal makeup. She pulled her hair into a simple twist. She slipped on modest heels that would let her stand for hours if needed. And she fastened the locket around her neck, letting it rest where her mother's hand had once placed it. Her reflection showed a woman who understood her worth. Not invisible now, present. Ready. The Uber ride to the Four Seasons felt longer than the actual 15 minutes. Rachel watched Seattle pass by her window. The city where she'd built her life, one careful choice at a time. The city that would now watch her step into a story she hadn't written but would have to live. The threshold of truth, the hotel lobby glittered with the kind of wealth that made ordinary people whisper. Rachel moved through it like water finding its course, steady, purposeful. She spotted Diane Foster near the elevators. Sleek in black, her smile sharp as she spoke to a technology journalist. Rachel recognized from industry events. Their eyes met across the marble expanse. Diane's smile widened, but her gaze held calculation. Rachel felt the weight of being watched, measured, judged. She lifted her chin slightly. Brave hearts beat softly. The ballroom doors stood open, releasing sounds of string quartet and crystal. Rachel paused at the threshold, her hand finding the locket through the fabric of her dress. Inside that room, Jonathan would be waiting. Inside that room, cameras would flash and rumors would spread. Inside that room, she would have to decide who she was when the world was finally looking. She took one breath. 2. Then Rachel. Bennett stepped forward into the light. No longer invisible, no longer apologizing for taking up space. Whatever came next, she would face it the way her mother had taught her. With quiet courage and a heart that refused to stop beating its own rhythm, the music swelled. The crowd turned, and Rachel walked into her own story, ready to write what happened next on her own terms. The weight of 1,000 eyes, the ballroom at the Four Seasons had been transformed into something between a tech showcase and an enchanted forest. Soft blue lighting mimicked twilight. Tables held centerpieces of sustainable materials in miniature. Holographic displays showing Whitmore Technology's latest innovations. But Rachel barely noticed the decor. She felt the attention like physical pressure against her skin. Jonathan stood near the main stage, speaking with board members. When he saw Rachel enter, something shifted in his expression. Not surprise, exactly. More like recognition, as if he'd been holding his breath and could finally exhale. He excused himself and walked toward her, his movements deliberate but unhurried. "You came," he said quietly. "I said I would." Rachel's voice was steady, though her heart drummed in urgent rhythm. The locket felt warm against her collarbone. Around them, conversations paused like skipped heartbeats. Heads turned. Phones lifted. Rachel saw the flash of camera phones trying to be discreet and failing. She thought of the photograph from yesterday, the whispers it had already planted. Now she was giving them a live performance. "Let them look," Jonathan said, as if reading her thoughts. "The truth has a way of outlasting gossip." He offered his arm. "Shall we navigate this circus together?" Rachel placed her hand lightly on his sleeve. The fabric was expensive, but what struck her was the steadiness beneath it. They moved through the crowd like a ship cutting through water, creating ripples but maintaining course. The VP's velvet-trap Diane Foster materialized near the bar, her black dress catching light like oil on water. She held a glass of champagne with the casual grip of someone who owned every room she entered. At 41, Diane had climbed the corporate ladder by knowing exactly which rungs to strengthen and which to saw through. "Jonathan," she said warmly, then turned to Rachel with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "And Rachel, how unexpected to see you here. In that capacity," the words hung like fishhooks, sharp beneath the polite surface. Rachel felt Jonathan's arm tense slightly under her hand, but she responded before he could. "Happy to support the company's charitable mission," Rachel said evenly. "The Environmental Fund has exceeded its goals this quarter." "Yes, your coordination has been thorough," Diane acknowledged, the compliment somehow feeling like criticism. "I hope you'll save a dance for me later, Jonathan. We have those acquisition strategies to discuss. The ones requiring executive discretion." The implication was clear. Rachel was staff. Diane was leadership. Know your place. Jonathan's response was mild but firm. "Monday's board meeting will cover strategies. Tonight is about the cause." He guided Rachel away, but not before she caught Diane's expression shifting. The smile remained, but her eyes had gone cold and calculating. "She's going to be a problem," Rachel murmured, as they walked toward their assigned table. "Diane's always a problem," Jonathan replied, "but she's a known variable. It's the unknown ones that worry me." When systems fail and hearts revealed in her past in careful conversation, Rachel sat beside Jonathan at the head table, acutely aware of every gesture being analyzed. She spoke when spoken to, kept her answers professional, and focused on the nonprofit. Leaders sharing how Whitmore Technologies funding had created clean water. Systems in developing regions. It was during the keynote speech that Rachel's phone buzzed insistently. She glanced down discreetly. A text from building security, breach in server room. Climate control failure. Temperature rising. Her blood chilled. The server room housed critical data for clients across 3 continents. A temperature spike could corrupt systems, destroy backups, cause millions in damage and lost trust. She looked at Jonathan, who was focused on the speaker. Rachel made a quick decision. She leaned close, her voice barely a whisper. "Security breach. Server room. I need to go." Jonathan's jaw tightened. He gave one short nod. Rachel slipped from her chair and moved toward the exit, her emergency training kicking in. She'd drilled for crises, planned for disasters, built contingency protocols that everyone assumed would never be needed. In the lobby, she called the head of IT security. "Talk to me, Robert." Climate control was manually overridden. Robert's voice crackled with stress. "Someone with access credentials. We're locked out of the override system." Rachel's mind raced. Who was last logged into facilities management? Pause. Foster, Diane. 2 hours ago. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. Diane hadn't just been positioning herself politically. She'd been creating a crisis she could solve, making herself indispensable while discrediting current leadership. And if Rachel happened to be collateral damage, so much the better. Keep trying the override, Rachel instructed. I'm getting the backup plan. She kicked off her heels and ran. Her apartment was 12 minutes away by car, but the building's emergency operations binder was in her locked desk drawer. Rachel had updated it quarterly, a precaution everyone mocked as excessive. Now, it was their lifeline. The Uber driver looked startled when an elegantly dressed woman sprinted barefoot into his car. But Rachel's tip convinced him to break a few speed limits. She grabbed the binder, found the manual override codes for the climate system, codes that bypassed digital controls entirely. Old-school failsafes that predated Diane's tenure, 23 minutes after leaving the gala. Rachel was in the server room, her green dress hitched up as she crawled behind equipment racks. Her hands found the mechanical override panel. The codes worked. Cool air flooded the space. Temperature gauges began their descent. Robert appeared in the doorway, relief washing over his face. You did it. We're stable. Rachel sat back against the wall, her carefully styled hair falling loose, her dress smudged with dust. She felt exhaustion and triumph in equal measure. Then she remembered the gala. Jonathan. The one dance she'd promised. The dance no. One expected when Rachel returned to the Four Seasons. The ballroom had shifted into its social phase. The formal program had ended. Now guests, mingled with drinks, the string quartet playing softer background melodies. She stood in the entrance, suddenly aware of her disheveled appearance, her bare feet, the smudges on her dress. Jonathan found her there. His tie was loosened, his expression concerned. Are you hurt? The servers are fine, she said. Crisis averted. He studied her face, seeing something there that made him pause. Rachel, what happened? She told him. Not just about the override and the manual codes, but about Diane's login, the calculated timing, the trap disguised as malfunction. Jonathan listened with growing stillness, the kind that precedes storms. You saved the company tonight, he said quietly. While wearing a ball gown and no shoes, Rachel laughed, surprising herself. It seemed important. The quartet began a waltz. Jonathan glanced toward the dance floor, then back at Rachel. I believe I owe you a dance. If you're not too tired, she was exhausted. Her feet hurt. She probably looked like she'd been through a corporate war zone because she had. But Rachel Bennett had learned something tonight. She'd learned that being seen didn't diminish her, that competence spoke louder than gossip, that she could step into the light and still be herself. One dance, she agreed. Jonathan led her to the floor. Other couples moved aside, whispers following like wake behind a boat. His hand found the small of her back. Her hand rested on his shoulder. They moved together with unexpected ease, finding rhythm despite everything. They're all watching, Rachel murmured. Let them, Jonathan replied. You just proved you're the strongest person in this room. Dance like you know it. So she did. Rachel stopped counting eyes and started counting beats. She felt the music instead of the judgment. She let herself exist in this moment, complicated and imperfect and entirely real. Around them, phones captured the image. By morning, it would be everywhere. The CEO and his assistant dancing while the company nearly burned, but Rachel no longer cared about the narrative others would build. She had her own truth. She had saved something that mattered. She had earned her place in this light. When the song ended, Jonathan didn't immediately release her. Thank you, he said. For everything you do, everything you are. Rachel felt those words settle into the spaces where doubt had lived. She nodded once, then stepped back with grace. Across the room, she saw Diane watching, her expression unreadable. The game had shifted. The invisible woman had revealed her hand, and it was stronger than anyone expected. The morning after Truth's Sunday morning brought Rachel a different kind of awakening. Her phone had been vibrating since dawn, messages and notifications accumulating like snow. She ignored them while making coffee, letting the familiar ritual ground her before facing whatever storm had gathered overnight. The news articles appeared first. Whitmore Tech's mystery woman, assistant or something more? The photographs showed her and Jonathan dancing, her disheveled appearance somehow reading as romantic rather than crisis-driven. Comment sections overflowed with speculation, judgment, and the particular cruelty of strangers who mistake themselves for experts on other people's lives. But buried among the gossip pieces, Rachel found something else. A technology blog had picked up the real story. Critical server breach averted by quick-thinking executive assistant. The article detailed the climate control sabotage and Rachel's intervention. Though it lacked the crucial detail about who had orchestrated the breach, Grace called at 8. "Are you okay?" "The pictures are everywhere." "Fine," Rachel said, and meant it. "The truth is more complicated than the photos show." "It always is," Grace replied. "But are you ready for tomorrow?" "The office will be brutal." Rachel thought about that. Tomorrow meant facing colleagues who'd seen the images, board members who'd draw conclusions, and Diane Foster, who now knew her sabotage had failed. "I have evidence," Rachel said carefully. "And I have the truth. That'll have to be enough." After they hung up, Rachel opened her laptop. She spent 3 hours building a timeline. Every login, every security credential use, every minute of the climate control override. She pulled camera footage from the building, showing Diane accessing restricted areas. She compiled maintenance records, proving the system had been functioning perfectly before manual intervention. Rachel wasn't just defending herself. She was building a case. The boardroom battlefield Monday's emergency board meeting was called for 10 o'clock. Rachel arrived at 9, wearing her usual professional attire. Her hair in its customary neat bun, the locket hidden but present. She carried a leather portfolio containing printed evidence and a flash drive with video. Documentation. Jonathan met her outside the conference room. "You don't have to be there," he said. "I can present this myself." "With respect, you can't," Rachel replied. "This started because I was seen as weak, as invisible. If I hide now, that narrative wins." She met his eyes. "I need to face this." The boardroom held 12 people who controlled Whitmore Technology's future. Rachel recognized each face. Some had been kind to her over the years. Others barely noticed her existence. Diane sat near the head of the table, composed and confident, her red suit like war paint. The board chairman, Preston Williams, opened the proceedings. "We're here to address concerns about professional boundaries and recent security breaches. Ms. Foster has brought forward allegations of compromised judgment and questions about data access." Diane stood, her presentation polished and poisonous. She showed the leaked photographs. She questioned Rachel's sudden visibility at executive events. She suggested that Jonathan's judgment had been clouded by inappropriate attachment. She painted a picture of impropriety and weakness disguised as loyalty. Furthermore, Diane concluded, the security breach occurred during a critical company event, showing lack of proper oversight and preparation. She looked directly at Rachel. Perhaps if certain individuals were focused on their actual responsibilities rather than social climbing, our systems would be more secure. The words hung in the air like smoke. Rachel felt them trying to define her, diminish her, erase everything she'd actually accomplished. She thought of her mother, who'd faced death without flinching. Brave hearts beat softly. Rachel stood. Her hands were steady. Her voice was clear. "May I respond?" When evidence speaks louder than gossip, Preston nodded, curiosity evident in his expression. Rachel connected her flash drive to the presentation system. The first image appeared. Security footage timestamped Saturday, 5:47 p.m. Diane Foster entering the facilities management office. "This is Ms. Foster accessing restricted systems 2 hours before the gala," Rachel began. "Watch carefully." The footage showed Diane at a terminal, her fingers moving across a keyboard. Rachel advanced to the next slide. A screenshot of system logs. At 5:52 p.m., using administrative credentials, climate controls for the server room were manually overridden. The shutdown sequence was initiated remotely. Diane's face remained calm, but Rachel saw the slight tightening around her eyes. Those credentials are shared among executives, Diane interjected smoothly. Anyone could have used my login. Rachel had anticipated this. The system requires both password and biometric confirmation. Fingerprint scans specifically. She pulled up another image. This is the biometric log. Your right index finger, Miss Foster, confirmed match. The room went very quiet. Rachel continued, her presentation methodical and devastating. She showed the temperature spike patterns, the locked override preventing intervention, the manual code she'd used from emergency protocols that Diane had recommended eliminating 6 months ago as outdated. If those fail-safes had been removed as proposed, Rachel said, the damage would have been irreversible. Millions in data loss. Client trust destroyed. All during our highest visibility charity event? This is circumstantial, Diane protested, but her voice had lost its certainty. A correlation of events. Rachel played her final card. Audio recording from the security office, Robert's voice clear. We're locked out. Last admin access was Foster Diane. The override was intentional. The board members shifted. Whispers began. Preston raised his hand for silence. Ms. Bennett, you're alleging deliberate sabotage? I'm presenting evidence, Rachel corrected gently. The conclusions are yours to draw. She paused, then added, but yes. Someone created a crisis they planned to solve, positioning themselves as essential while discrediting current leadership. The timing with the photographs, the leaked images suggesting impropriety, it's a pattern of manipulation. Yes. Jonathan spoke for the first time. Rachel saved this company Saturday night. While others were creating problems, she was solving them. The question isn't about her judgment. It's about ours. The founder's voice, the screen flickered. A video call connected. The board members turned toward the monitor, where a face appeared. Weathered, but familiar. Thomas Whitmore, Jonathan's father and company founder, called in from his retirement home in Portland. At 78, he rarely involved himself in operations, but his presence still commanded respect. I've been watching this unfold, Thomas said, his voice carrying the rasp of age but losing none of its authority. Watched my son build something extraordinary. Watched good people maintain it. And watched ambitious people try to tear it apart for personal gain. He looked directly at the camera. I knew Catherine, Jonathan's wife. She taught me something important before she died. She said the strongest people are the ones you don't notice until everything falls apart. The ones holding things together while everyone else is performing. Thomas shifted his gaze to where Rachel stood. Ms. Bennett, I've read your personnel file. 7 years of perfect crisis management. 15 successful product launches coordinated. 0 complaints, 0 scandals, 0 failures. Until someone decided you were a threat simply by being competent. He turned to Diane. Foster, you've been positioning yourself for my son's job for 2 years. I'm not blind, and I'm not senile. But sabotage? That's not ambition. That's desperation. The weight of the founder's words settled over the room. Preston cleared his throat. We need to vote on immediate actions. First, regarding the security breach investigation. The vote was unanimous. Full forensic audit. Criminal investigation, if warranted. Diane was suspended pending results. Second, Preston continued regarding Ms. Bennett's role in the company. He looked at Rachel. This board recognizes exceptional service and judgment under pressure. We're creating a new position. Director of Strategic Operations. You'll report directly to the CEO with full executive authority. Rachel felt the room tilt slightly. Not from fear this time. From recognition. From being seen not as scandal or ornament, but as exactly who she'd always been. Competent, essential, worthy. There's a condition, Preston added. You'll need to be more visible. Executive meetings. Client presentations. Board updates. No more hiding in the background. Rachel thought of her mother's locket, the inscription about brave hearts. She thought of every moment she'd chosen invisibility over risk. Every time she'd let competence speak silently instead of claiming her voice. I accept, she said clearly. Thank you. The dance of new beginnings 3 weeks later, Rachel stood in her new office. Not a desk facing a courtyard, but a corner space, with windows overlooking both the sound and the city. Her name on the door in clean letters. Director of Strategic Operations Jonathan appeared in the doorway, holding 2 coffee cups. Thought you might need this. First executive meeting at 2. Diane's replacement arrives tomorrow, Rachel noted, taking the cup. The new VP of Operations had been thoroughly vetted, her background checked 3 times. Trust, once broken, required careful rebuilding. The press has moved on, Jonathan observed. New scandals to chase. Rachel smiled slightly. They'll be disappointed to learn we're actually just colleagues who respect each other, are we? Jonathan asked, and something in his tone made Rachel look up. Just colleagues. The question hung between them, complicated and honest. Rachel thought about the past month, the crisis that had pushed them together, the truth that had emerged, the way respect had deepened into something more difficult to name. I don't know, she admitted, but I know I won't hide anymore. Not from work. Not from possibility. Not from whatever this becomes. Jonathan nodded slowly. Then we'll figure it out, honestly. In daylight. No more shadows. Through the window, Seattle spread out in afternoon sun, rare and brilliant. Rachel touched the locket at her throat, feeling her mother's presence in the choice she was making. To be seen, to be valued, to take up space without apology. Her phone buzzed. Grace texting. Lunch this week. I promise not to laugh at anything, Rachel typed back. You can laugh. Just laugh with me, not at me. The response came immediately. Always. Proud of you. Rachel set down her phone and returned to the window. Somewhere in this city, stories were being written about her. Some true, some false, all incomplete. But she no longer needed to control the narrative others built. She had her own truth, her own voice, her own place in the light. The invisible woman had become undeniable. Not through spectacle or scandal, but through the quiet accumulation of competence, courage, and the refusal to apologize for being exactly who she was meant to be. And in the reflection of the glass, Rachel saw herself clearly for the first time. Not invisible, not ornamental, simply present, powerful, and free. The music of her life continued. No longer played in whispers, but in the strong, steady rhythm of a heart that had learned to beat its truth out loud.